Hi, my name is Kayla Patterson, Product Marketing Manager for Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Insights, and I am excited to talk to you about our new product now in public preview. I am a white female in my 30s with red shoulder length hair, and I'm wearing a black top. I'm joining you from my home office in Indianapolis, Indiana. In the breakout session, Enhance Supply Chain Visibility, Predict Risks, and Improve Decision Making with Indranil and Anand, you may have felt compelled to jump on your holiday shopping. I certainly have felt that push to get ahead of the task, lest I miss out on the hottest toy for toddlers or the perfect book for a loved one. But shortages and delays on the items we purchase aren't just limited to the winter holidays. I personally felt the impact of such disruptions when trying to buy a balance bike for my toddler this summer. Everyday products like coffee, ketchup, paper, rubber, and diapers, ooh, that hits home for this new parent, are all examples of products that have been recently affected by an increasingly taxed supply chain. In 2020, we experienced certain product shortages as a result of consumer hoarding, fueled by anxiety and uncertainty about how much time we were going to be spending at home. In 2021, increasing shortages and disruptions across all industries and across the globe have shown us just how vulnerable the supply chain can be. Organizations are faced with some critical barriers to proactively planning for and overcoming supply chain disruptions, including lack of visibility into multiple tiers of suppliers across the supply chain, being unable to predict capacity bottlenecks and supply disruptions, having no standard method, technology, or format for exchanging data about supply chain with suppliers and other collaborators, and lack of real-time reporting from suppliers and other external collaborators. In the face of these challenges, it is imperative for businesses to improve resiliency of their supply chains. Nearly 70% of supply chain leaders have been constantly responding to disruptions since the beginning of 2019. Both supply chain professionals and retailers understand this and are planning for these improvements, with 87% of supply chain professionals planning investments in resiliency, and 89% of that same group want to invest in agility. We at Microsoft are incredibly passionate about bringing this vision of a more resilient and agile supply chain to life. To illustrate how our new product, Supply Chain Insights, is rising to meet this challenge, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Omar Chowdhury.
Thanks, Kayla. I'm Omar Chowdhury, Principal Group Product Manager for Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Insights. I'm wearing a blue shirt and I'm joining you from Redmond, Washington. Supply Chain Insights, we look forward to empowering businesses to overcome the challenges that Kayla discussed earlier. This starts with enabling businesses to gain enhanced end-to-end supply chain visibility. It further empowers them to make decisions based on early warning signals or risk alerts, such as bad weather or environmental disasters. They can gain visibility into their first, second, or third tier suppliers to identify and proactively mitigate any disruptions to their production process. By creating a digital supply chain twin and using advanced analytics powered by Azure AI and machine learning, businesses can perform simulations at scale. This helps them better understand the impact of various constraints and identify the best solutions to prevent a disruption from happening to ensure that customer demands are met on time. Lastly, with out-of-the-box connectors from Power Platform, Supply Chain Insights can connect to other ERP and supply chain execution systems, enabling businesses to truly get operational fast, within weeks. These insights can seamlessly be implemented through your existing supply chain execution systems, thus initiating a powerful digital feedback loop. Let's dive deeper into the product now. So every participant in Supply Chain Insights is an equal participant. They all land on this landing page, which shows a few key details for the user. The first one being the onboarding experience, which is really about first bringing in your data, completing your company profile information, and then inviting others to join your network. To the right here, we also have all the notifications, whether a partner is inviting you or they're requesting data from you. You'll see it in the notifications tab. You'll also be able to see curated news for your organization down here. Next, we get into first bringing in your data. So these data entities are really the ones that are going to drive all of the supply map and analytics I'm going to show you later in the demo. So these entities really cover your products, your items, your orders, your facilities, your suppliers and customer facilities, so that then we can surface all of the data and the analytics that we need. Now here you can see that the experience that we're using is leveraging Power Query. So if you're familiar with Power Query, it's a very easy to use tool that allows you to ingest data and then set up the frequency in which you want the data to be refreshed. So now let's get into the supply map. Here you can see the entire supply, you can see different locations in your supply chain, and you can see that you have facilities across the globe, and most of them are doing okay, but then you have this one facility here in Florida which seems to have a higher risk score. So we allow you to see what the risk score is and what is driving the risk score by clicking on the list field here. So here you can see the site details. You can see what is the information driving the risk. So all of the different elements that come together to essentially create this risk profile. And then if there is some sort of real-time weather event that's actually happening, that could increase the risk dynamically as well. In this public preview, we've really started off with natural disasters as a starting point for risk, but we will continue to add more and more risk signals for each facility, location, and customer. Now, if you have a risk, a facility that you see that may be at risk, you can then dive deep and look at what are the open purchase orders that you have related to this facility. So you can then see that you have 4 open purchase orders for this facility. You have some delayed shipments already, and then you can start diving into what are the different line items within this purchase order, and what are the items inside each of these purchase orders that are potentially going to be either delayed or impacted. So once you've taken a look at all of this information, you can either go into your IOM, your ERP system, and start making changes, or you can further dive deeper into the analytics, which I'll show you in very soon. So there are 2 other areas that I wanted to kind of highlight before we jump into the next session. One is that you're able to see what each facility represents through the legend here, and then you're able to see all of the different risks that we brought in to as far as natural disaster risks via this drop down by looking, which then overlays the data on top of the supply map. So once you select, say, river is flooding, or the potential of flooding, you can see that this will overlay flood data and the probability of floods happening in this location on top of the supply map. And similarly, if you select tornado, you can also see the probability of tornadoes happening in certain areas and regions. And so now you're able to look at your facilities and see what is the probability of this facility facing some sort of natural disaster. Now that you've brought in your data, you've looked at some of the early risk signals that you've been getting in from our natural disaster and signals that we're getting from our partner. You can see that we can now invite partners to further collaborate on data. So here you can look at all of your the participants within SCI, and then start looking and trying to find the participants that you would want to invite into your network to be able to collaborate with. You can invite them, and the way that the app has been designed and built is that you could invite a supplier, a vendor, or a customer. Or if all of your data is housed in your ERP systems or various systems of record, you can import that data into supply chain insights and then be able to invite those participants by importing their information and sending the invites from here. You'll then be able to see who has accepted your invites and be able to then collaborate with those participants. Next, I will walk us through the data collaboration piece. So now that we've invited other participants to our network and are connected with them, we can start requesting data from them. And the way that we would do this is through data collaboration and creating a data collaboration project. So now here we can put in what the name of this collaboration is. We can go in and select who are the partners that we want to be a part of this collaboration. We can then look at what are the different entities that we would want them to share and how often do we want them to share it with us and when do we want them to share it with us. We can also see that we would there are certain analytics within SCI that are driven by certain entities and certain data. So we would want the ability for, say, if you wanted supply and demand analytics, we can then recommend to you what entities you'll need for that, to power that part of supply chain insights. You can then look at each entity and filter out which attributes you want, which ones you don't want, and be able to request only the data that you really need. So once you're done, you can then send that request out to the other participant that's in your supply chain and then be able to see a status of that data sharing. So now we're looking at the analytics part of supply chain insights. And you've brought in all of your data from your systems of records, you've imported it in. So now you're able to see several things inside this application. So you're able to filter by date ranges. So maybe you want to look at your supply and demand part shortages, or the top 10 by a certain date range. You can filter it and move the slider forward or back. But essentially what we show is two different charts to start off with. Which are the top 10 parts that you may have a supply shortage of, and what are the top 10 parts that you might have an oversupply of? So where does your demand exceed the quantity you have in stock, in transit, and what is potentially being committed to you? So one important thing to note here is that when we created this data collaboration project, we are now able to create a systematic way which you can get committed data from your suppliers. So instead of your supplier sending over an Excel spreadsheet or coming up with a fancy way or a lot of the out-of-the-box ways of sending over what they're going to commit to you over the next 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, they're able to now send that over through this data collaboration project, and you're able to bring in combined data that you have, such as your demand, your in-transit, and your current stock, with supplier data that they are providing you in a systematic way, which can then be merged without lots of merging and lots of Excel work and so forth. So I wanted to highlight that this is a combination of data, and what you can see then below is really a breakdown of the data above. So these are items, and within items what we're doing is giving you a week by week breakdown so that you can see at what week will you start seeing either a supply shortage or a significant oversupply. And this will allow you to start preparing and know how much lead time you have before you might see a disruption on your manufacturing floor. The next analytics I'll show you is really around your digital twin of your supply chain. So this is one way of looking at what products you have, who are supplying those products, which suppliers are supplying those products, and what are the items within those products, so the subcomponents. So you can see if you click on alloy wheels, you can see that these alloy wheels go into certain products, and they are also in and leveraged by Contoso Brazil, Contoso US, and Contoso Florida. So this is an interesting way of being able to look at how the relationship is between where products are being used, what items are being used, and which suppliers are providing those items. You can also look at the warehouses across your globe and be able to see what is the stock for those particular items. And and then I will jump into now the shipping data. So once you've brought in your data, you're also able to look at what shipments are on time, what shipments are potentially being delayed, which ones might actually come in sooner, which means you might have an over supply for some period. But this gives you kind of a holistic view of what is going on with your shipments for those products during certain time ranges. Then I'll jump into overall vendor performance. So because you brought in a lot of your purchase order data, we are able to now take that data and be able to look at which suppliers have been supplying you with goods on time, how often have they been late, and to begin to give you some performance metrics really around overall supplier performance. So if you do have a disruption with a supplier, you're able to then look at which ones you should potentially shift to and which ones have a higher likelihood of delivering on time quality parts and products to you. And the last part of the analytics that I'll cover right now is really around being able to look at your and do some what if analysis around your supply chain. So first here in the graph, you're able to look at kind of the relationship between parts, who supplies those parts. So you might be getting this from two different vendors, and then where are those parts being stored. So this is another way of kind of looking at the relationship between parts, suppliers, and where the locations you have them stored. And you have a similar breakdown of your kind of time to impact analysis of when you might have challenges with this particular part. But one interesting thing that you can do here is begin to look at how a potential increase in demand or decrease in demand could really impact your supply chain. So here you can say I might have a 26% increase for this particular part. How is it going to impact my supply chain? And so now you can see that the week by week analysis has been updated, and you might then see your production may not meet your demand because of this increase. And also you might have the same situation with your supply. So you might have a 20% or 30% reduction in supply, and that will then also be reflected in the weekly analysis below. So you can play around with this and kind of simulate what would happen in certain situations where there might be a spike in demand or there might be a sudden drop in supply, to start gauging where are the vulnerabilities in your supply chain. When you brought your data in, your supplier data in, we now want to be able to scan your supply chain and be able to give you early warning signals that might also come from news sources. So working and partnering with Bing, we're able to surface different news articles related to your supply chain and be able to surface them so that you can then understand if those facilities or those suppliers are going to be negatively impacted by a strike or a shutdown, or they're going to be they were impacted by flooding. And so here you can see that we can dive into what is the what company has been impacted, and we're going to bring a lot more metrics with and data with our some of our AI models to be able to parse through these news articles and understand what is the net impact to the production facility. So that was a brief overview of the product. Back to you, Kayla.
Thanks, Omar. That was a great deep dive into supply chain insights. We saw how businesses can enhance visibility, proactively overcome disruptions, and get operational fast to create a more resilient supply chain.
We are really excited about bringing Dynamics 365 supply chain insights to market to help organizations such as yours create a resilient supply chain and deliver a great customer experience. To sign up for public preview, visit aka.ms/D365SCI.
Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your Ignite experience.